So in the fourth Thangka, Tsongkhapa, well, the first scene in the fourth Thangka is when he meets who's to be his main teacher, his heart teacher through his entire life. His name is Rendawa Shonu Ludro. He's a great Sakya master, Rendawa Shonu Ludro. And he's about 10 years older than Lama Tsongkhapa. So there's a little story leading up to how he met Rendawa. So Tsongkhapa was at a different monastery, I think Dewa Chen monastery, and he received an explanation on Abhidharma, but he wasn't very satisfied with the explanation he received from that scholar. And then he was shown a commentary on the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras called Nyatik, which had a much clearer explanation than he'd ever seen before, and especially clearly explained the passages from Abhidharma, which he hadn't found any clear explanation of yet. So then he thought, I want to seek out the author of this text, whose name is Nyapon Kunga Pel. And so at that time, this scholar, Nyapon Kunga Pel, was very old, probably his late 70s, 80s. But Tsongkhapa went to him and received a commentary on the Perfection of Wisdom, on the Ornament of Clear Realization, which he was extremely pleased with. And he requested Nyapon Kunga Pel for an additional explanation on Abhidharma. But at that time, that Lama said, I'm quite busy teaching other students, and also I'm very old, and I don't have so much energy, so it'd be better if you go to my student, Rendawa Shonu Ludro, and he can give you an explanation. So then based on that recommendation, Tsongkhapa went to meet Rendawa, and he was extremely pleased, extremely impressed with Rendawa's explanation. Mainly because Rendawa didn't just give an explanation of the words and each line of the text he was explaining, but he gave an overview of all the important points and really was able to unfold, unpack, and clearly explain the essential meaning of the entire text together with the word commentary. Tsongkhapa was extremely impressed, and Rendawa was also extremely impressed with Tsongkhapa as a disciple, and he said something to the effect of, to give you a deep explanation, one has to be very careful. Because Tsongkhapa would easily find faults. So the first teaching Tsongkhapa received from Rendawa is called a finger-pointing instruction on the Abhidharma, which means kind of a very deep explanation of the Abhidharma text. And then later he also receives his first teaching on the middle way, a text called Entering the Middle Way by Chandakirti, who gave the most definitive interpretation of Nagarjuna's texts on the middle way. And also a commentary on the auto commentary to the middle way, also by Chandakirti. So those are texts that Tsongkhapa writes commentaries on later on in his life. Then later, from another great scholar of the time called Kashiwa Lotzel, Tsongkhapa receives his first commentary on monastic discipline. So of the 5 different topics that are studied by someone in the Nalanda tradition, one of them is the monastic discipline, or Vinaya. So he researched. So this is from the time Tsongkhapa was about 20 to probably 24 or so in this Thangka. So he received the first commentary on monastic discipline. Then so while he's receiving that commentary, he's memorizing 17 folios every day. So a folio is like a long Tibetan loose leaf scripture has print on both sides, so that's one folio. So Tsongkhapa's memorizing like 17 of those every day, and it seems he shows the aspect of getting kind of lung, just like wind disease in the upper part of his body, and it takes him about a year or two to recover from that. Later on, he finally gets some special instruction how to recover from that, and then later recovers. During this time, probably when he's about 21, Tsongkhapa gives his first teaching on Abhidharma to a group of attendants and disciples and people in the area where he's staying at that time. Then what happens? In the Thangka there's many different scenes. So you can see Tsongkhapa's moving around from different monastery to monastery, receiving different teachings, and then gradually giving more and more teachings. So this time he's traveling quite a lot with his main teacher, Rendawa. And he's also sitting for more of these monastic debate rounds. So he's mostly finished with, by the time he's 19, 20, he's mostly finished with sitting for these public debate examinations on the perfections. and now he's sitting more for debate examinations on Abhidharma, and then Pramana and Vinaya. So during this time also he begins studying Pramana, or Buddhist logic and valid cognition. Together with a great translator called Donzang, he receives the commentary on valid cognition, and then sits for a debate round on that soon afterwards. Then again he's studying the upper and lower Abhidharmas. So one of those is by Asanga, another is by Vasubandhu. The lower one's by Vasubandhu, the upper one's by Asanga, of the Abhidharma. And then he begins studying the 6 collections of reasoning, which are 6 texts on the middle way view, or the middle way view by Nagarjuna. And he receives the lineage of all those at Bodong from Rendawa. Yeah, then he's basically going to other monasteries, Sangpo Monastery, and then he goes to central Tibet. And then at the end of this, it's good to mention, at the end of this Thangka, so at the bottom right-hand corner, he does a retreat on the goddess of wisdom, which is common to both Hindu and Buddhism, Saraswati. She's depicted in white and holding a kind of Indian string instrument. And he does a retreat when he recites 60 million mantras. In relation to Saraswati, no, sorry, not 60, 50 million. 50 million mantras of Saraswati, and then he has an appearance of Saraswati's holy face. And so it's usually that's kind of an indication that one receives the blessing of that deity. When you do a retreat on a deity and then you have an appearance of the face, so it's considered he received the blessing of this deity Saraswati. And then he starts giving the initiation of Saraswati and becomes kind of renowned for that soon afterwards. When he was 23, he'd been absent from, he hadn't seen his mother and his father, basically, since he was like 16. And they missed him a lot. And they heard that he's becoming a renowned scholar in central Tibet, and they want him to come home because they're getting old and they don't know when they're going to pass away. So they want to see him again. So his mother and father and many people in his homeland, they send with one caravan, they send a whole bunch of gifts and offerings and a request for Tsongkhapa to come home again, to teach Dharma there and to see his parents again. So Tsongkhapa goes to just a little bit east of Lhasa, to the place where caravans leave from, to go to his home area. And he's thinking to go, actually. But then he thinks about it more, and he kind of comes to the conclusion, actually it said in one biography, he starts to study kind of rituals and stuff that you do to bless lay people and country folk. And then he kind of thinks, what am I going to do if I go home? What am I really going to accomplish? Yes, I'll see my parents. Maybe there's some benefit, but maybe I'll never even be able to come back to central Tibet and continue my studies. So then through reflection and maybe, I don't know, some other divination or some other means, I'm not sure, but he decides not to go home and rather to stay in central Tibet and continue with his studies. So it's said that that time he made a drawing of himself for his mother, and he sent it to her. And that when she opened it up, it spoke to her and said "Ama," which means mother in Tibetan. That's kind of oral kind of lineage, oral tale, right? So, but at that time, then Tsongkhapa, so he decided not to go home to see his parents and the people in his homeland, but rather to stay in central Tibet. So immediately after that, he put a lot of effort into studying Pramana, Buddhist logic and valid cognition, and especially the proofs and reasons that are used to prove that what the Buddha taught essentially is true, that it's possible to abandon all afflictive emotions from the root, thereby it's possible to achieve liberation from the process of birth, old age, sickness, and death through the force of afflictive emotions and karma. It's possible to achieve liberation, and that it's possible to achieve enlightenment, all through reasoning. So studying these texts, especially texts by Dharmakirti, then it said that at one point Tsongkhapa had such deep realization of the truth of what Buddha taught that he had his hair stood on end and tears poured from his eyes. Right? So that's all in Thangka 4.